Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking about medically unexplained symptoms, stress and well-being, and how they interrelate with each other. Imagine for a moment being a young student or graduate, frequent headaches, stomach cramps, feeling low, tired, just feeling like your future is in a predicament because you've got so much ill health. You've dropped out twice now and rested at university. You've also recently had a couple of extensions on assignments due to your ill health. You feel isolated. Your friends and family have heard it all. You've been to the GP regularly over the last 2 or 3 years to find out what's wrong with you. You've been for tests, you've been for scans, you've been for investigations. They all come back negative. What's wrong with you? Are you the only one that the doctor can't find out what's wrong with you? This is a typical scenario of someone who's suffering from MUS, or medically unexplained symptoms. That is, persistent bodily symptoms for which there is no medical explanation. If you're familiar with some of this scenario, then you're not alone, because MUS is very, very common indeed. We know, for example, that 75% of the 10 most common symptoms that are presented at GP practice are for medically unexplained symptoms. For example, chest pain, shortness of breath. Some people might recognize some of these symptoms. Numbness, swelling, dizziness, insomnia, backache, headache, abdominal pain. You know what I'm talking about. We've all had them from time to time. But when they're going on and on and on, they're chronic. We know, for example, that in primary care, between 26 and 35% of all visits are for medically unexplained symptoms. We also know that 50% of the hospital visits are for medically unexplained symptoms. 1 in 5 GP visits and up to 18% of consecutive attendances are for medically unexplained symptoms. We also know that associated with medically unexplained symptoms are adverse child experiences and mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, and also chronic stress. This month, April, is the International Month for Stress Awareness, so I'm going to talk a bit about stress. The World Health Organization has stated that stress is the highest risk factor for health. We know, for example, that stress can be a risk factor for medically explained conditions such as cardiovascular diseases, but also for medically unexplained conditions and mental health conditions as well. So it's very likely that in the student population as a whole, there will be quite a large number of people suffering from MUS. So just to take mental health in the student population, for example, very busy lives, lots of work to do, assignments to get in, but also having to earn money at the same time. So financial worries as well, and the stresses of perhaps the information overload and social media and so on. So we know mental health in a student population is higher than in the non-university peer population. It peaks between the ages, poor mental health peaks between the ages of 18 and 25, just those years where students are at university or just graduated. We also know that in the UK, as a country, we are 47th out of 49 countries for young people's well-being. We know, for example, that MUS mainly affects women, young people, and non-native speakers. We also know that mental health, in terms of student population, the well-being is going down and the stress is going up in terms of levels. And we also know that students have reported in the 2016 survey that 92% of those students who reported having mental distress while at university. Coming back to our, well, perhaps we ought to say, before I go back to the young student, the need to manage our stress levels is overwhelming within the university population. We need to help students to learn how to regulate their stress levels, to prevent not just MUS, but also mental health conditions. So going back to our young student. So the young student is in doubt whether she really, or he really has these symptoms. So they're living in an uncertain world. Are they the only one? The GP can't find out what's wrong with them. They feel isolated. If they imagine that perhaps they haven't got these symptoms, then they're referred to mental health services. That compounds the issue. They start doubting themselves. Are they really experiencing these feelings in their body, these sensations, or is it all in their imagination? So living with uncertainty, have they got something more serious? They just haven't found it yet? Is it the big C? Living with this uncertainty creates stress in itself, and the stress will then make the symptoms worse. So then they go back to the GP again. So it just becomes a sort of downward spiral. So we need to learn to manage our stress levels, especially if we've got medically unexplained symptoms. But how do we adapt to stress naturally? Well, we automatically assess any stimulus in our environment as a threat for our survival, our well-being, and our safety. This stimulus is received in our body-mind. We are body, mind, in environment. So when we perceive a threat to our survival, whether that's real or imagined, we automatically have a response which is mobility. And this is the first response that we would have. There is another response called immobility, but I'll just talk about the first response. This mobility is when the fear, probably fear, maybe anger, sends a message into the body, and the muscles either of the arms for fight or to the legs for run, flee, so you get your fight or flight reflex. Then if there's inactivation, there will be a different kind of response, immobility. This is where we have the faint, the fold in protection, or rabbit in the headlights, freeze. Now, if that threat is unresolved, for whatever reason, we can get stuck in one of these stress reflexes. It becomes chronic. This stuckness can be altered. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but we see that the stress reflex can sometimes do more harm than good. The light at the end of the tunnel is that there are practices that we can do every day which will release some of these happy hormones that Simon was talking about earlier, the dopamine and so on. They're these practices which are the hormones that are mood regulating. So they are preventative for MUS and mental health conditions. They regulate our mood and our stress levels, and we feel good. It's about well-being. So we can alter the stuckness either through the body or the mind, or more effectively, both at the same time, to release these happy hormones. So the various practices we can offer, and there's one I'm going to particularly tell you about, which is about the body-mind approach, and it's designed to support people to live well, to manage their own symptoms day to day and thrive, because surviving with symptoms is just existing with them. It's just existing. We want to have good well-being despite the symptoms. So we're thriving rather than just existing, surviving. And the body-mind approach has been researched here and abroad, and we've had some quite interesting and encouraging results in our deliveries. So if I move on to the next, oh, let's come up the wrong way. The pink one should be on the bottom. But if we think about the medical model, we focus either on the body or the mind, and ignoring the interaction between the body-mind, which is emphasized in medically unexplained symptoms, and which TBMA tackles. TBMA is a 2-hourly, 12-weekly group, facilitated group experience with 6 months of non-face-to-face contact thereafter. And the whole idea is to support people to get to know and accept in a compassionate way their symptoms. So different ways of knowing, exploring symptoms to find meaning within the symptoms, lowering arousal levels with various practices, raising vitality levels with other practices, working from the lived body experience, subjective sense of the body, and then exploring through the sensations, good and not so good sensations, the parts that are well and feel good and the parts that maybe not so good. So we go from the body, the place of the distress, into the mind, and then back into the body. So it's actually addressing both body and mind at the same time, hence the patients came up with the word body-mind. The recent deliveries of the body-mind approach have been quite encouraging. For example, patients have reported increased well-being, increased activity levels, and overall functioning, and decreases in symptom distress, depression, and anxiety. 73% of people reported that. 95% of people remained on the program. They completed the learning process. And 97% of people reported they would recommend TBMA to their friends and family without hesitation. Interestingly, most people reported a sense of well-being. So what is well-being? It's physical, it's emotional, it's social, and it's spiritual. Feelings of optimism, connectedness with others, relating with others, relaxation, give a sense of purpose, give a sense of agency, make us feel like we can cope and get on with every day, even though there are problems, we can still manage to cope. Resilience, if you like. But well-being, and you can have good well-being and still have MUS, but well-being is a balance, and sometimes it's lost for whatever reason. So what's the key to unlocking well-being if it's lost? So everyday practices, intentionally paying attention with consciousness to the present moment. Forgetting about the future and fretting, and forgetting about worrying about the past, just staying in the present. Maybe a movement moment, being in that movement moment as you climb the stairs every day. Noticing in the body any signals for stress, loss of focus, fidgeting, feeling tired. Forget the coffee. Go and find somewhere safe to relax, to rebalance your well-being. Saying no sometimes to demands or requests that might overfill your stress bucket. Other practices like graded exercise, progressive relaxation, a movement form like Tai Chi or dance, singing, going out into nature, being with animals, being present with other people, being kind to yourself and to others. Joining the next TBMA group, maybe. So I'd just like to invite you to participate in a very short exercise which helps to strengthen that body-mind connection. You don't have to do anything except just sit. So if you just let your eyes glance down, focusing down, or you can close them. You can take 2 deep breaths from your belly. And with your mind's eye, just scanning your body for a sensation. Any sensation, pleasant, not so pleasant, doesn't matter. Let your kind attention rest in that place. And breathing again, allow your body to relax, and then scan again for another sensation, but this time the opposite. So if it was pleasant, then maybe not so pleasant, vice versa. So with your mind's eye, notice where that is. Let your kind attention rest there. And just notice what happens. And so gradually opening your eyes and focusing on something in the distance to bring you back to the space. So in summary then, you can manage your stress levels. You can manage your symptoms by managing those stress levels through embodied practices in order to thrive and regain your well-being, so that when times get tough, you can bounce back. Thank you very much.